10 Creepy Mysteries Involving Unidentified People. In 1971, a person who identified themselves as D.B. Cooper became famous for committing one of the most remarkable crimes in history. They hijacked a commercial aircraft and obtained a ransom of $200,000 before parachuting out of the plane with the money. For more than 4 decades, this incident has remained one of the most well-known and unsolved mysteries. Not just because Cooper has never been found, but because no one knows who this person was. This event has captivated public interest due to the anonymous nature of the perpetrator, and is among a number of other unsolved mysteries that hinge on discovering the true identity of individuals who have taken great care to remain hidden. Number 10. Benjamin Kyle. On August 31, 2004, a 50-something man was discovered in a state of undress between 2 dumpsters behind a Burger King in Richmond Hill, Georgia. 3 depressions in his head suggested he had been struck by a blunt object. With no identification, the man was unable to remember his name or where he was from. Doctors diagnosed him with retrograde amnesia, which meant he was unlikely to ever regain his memory. As he was discovered near a Burger King, he was nicknamed BK, and eventually chose Benjamin Kyle as his new name. Although he has no clear memory, Benjamin has fragments of his past, which could potentially lead to his identity. He believes he was born on August 29, 1948 and is from Indianapolis, having once lived in Colorado. With knowledge of the restaurant business, investigators have looked into numerous possibilities, including DNA testing and fingerprint checks. However, despite 9 years of searching, Benjamin Kyle remains a man without an identity. Number 9. Bella in the White Elm. On April 18, 1943, 4 boys from Stourbridge, England were illegally hunting in Hagley Woods when they came across a witch hazel tree with a large hollow trunk. One of the boys climbing the tree discovered a human skull inside. After police were alerted, they found an entire skeleton concealed in the tree, plus a shoe, gold wedding ring, and pieces of clothing. A severed hand was also buried near the tree. A taffeta fabric was found in the mouth of the skull, indicating the victim had died from being strangled. An autopsy determined the victim was a female who had been deceased for at least 18 months. Interestingly, a local had reported hearing a scream in Hagley Woods about 18 months before the discovery. Though the woman was never identified, her story continued to be told when mysterious graffiti messages started to appear on walls, typically reading, "Who put Bella in the White Elm?" These inscriptions all seem to have been written by the same unknown person, who may have had knowledge about the event. The final time this message was seen was in 1999, when it was sprayed on the 200-year-old Witchbury obelisk. It was speculated that the unidentified female could have been a victim of dark magic, or a member of a spy network who was providing secrets to the Luftwaffe about local munitions factories. After 70 years, the identity of Bella and the mystery of who put her in the White Elm remain unsolved. Number 8. Perseus. For decades, the United States and the Soviet Union were engaged in a covert battle of espionage, and one of the most remarkable cases of a successful spy was never identified. During World War II, the U.S. conducted the Manhattan Project, a research and development program to create the world's first atomic bombs. 3 members of the project, Klaus Fuchs, David Greenglass and Theodore Hall, were found to be agents of the Soviet Union. However, in 1991, a Russian intelligence colonel named Vladimir Chekhov wrote several articles alleging the Soviets had received information about the project from an unverified spy named Perseus. Supposedly, this individual was a highly placed scientist who worked at the White Sands Missile Range and the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico and had been involved in the project a year prior to the other spies. The intel he provided was credited with giving the Soviets a jump start in their nuclear efforts. In 1999, Philip Morrison, an eminent MIT physicist and former Manhattan Project member, was accused of being Perseus, but he was able to provide evidence of his innocence. It is possible that Perseus was a fictitious character, but if not, the spy has managed to avoid detection for the last 70 years. Number 7. John Doe Number 24. On October 11, 1945, police discovered an African-American young man walking the streets of Jacksonville, Illinois who was mute and deaf and, therefore, unable to communicate. He was brought before a judge, who sentenced him to the Lincoln State School and Colony. He was the 24th unidentified man to be admitted to the state's mental health system, so he was labeled John Doe No. 24. At the state institutions, he experienced a long period of maltreatment and eventually became blind. However, despite his harsh treatment, John Doe No. 24 kept a positive attitude and sense of humor. After spending more than 30 years in the mental health system, he was transferred to a nursing home in Peoria. He would sometimes write the name Lewis, which could have been a clue to his identity, but it was never discovered. He was around 64 years old when he died due to a stroke on November 28, 1993. In honor of his story, musician Mary Chapin Carpenter bought a headstone for his unmarked grave and composed a song called John Doe No. 24. Number 6. The Rodney Alcala photos. Rodney Alcala, the notorious serial killer, is currently on death row at San Quentin State Prison. He earned the nickname, Dating Game Killer, after appearing on the show The Dating Game in the middle of his murder spree. He won, but his potential date wisely chose not to go on a date with him. Alcala was convicted of 7 murders, though authorities believe there may have been more. After his arrest in 1979, investigators searched a storage locker he had rented in Seattle, discovering trophies of his crimes and more than 1,000 disturbing photographs. These photos show numerous unidentified young women and teenage boys, mostly in nude or sexually explicit poses. Alcala often posed as a professional photographer to entice people to his home to pose for him, and authorities fear some of the people in the photos might be undiscovered victims. Most of them were too sexually explicit to be published, but in 2010, 120 of them were released to the public in search of help. So far, more than 20 women have been identified. Some believe they have seen a missing family member in the images. As of yet, none of them have been confirmed as a missing person or an unsolved homicide victim, though one day they might be recognized as victims of the dating game killer. Number 5. The Persian Princess. On October 19, 2000, Pakistani authorities located a mummy inside a gilded wooden coffin at the home of a tribal leader named Wali Muhammad Riki, who claimed he had obtained the artifact from an Iranian after an earthquake in Kedah. Ali Akbar, a man who had been questioned in relation to a murder investigation, had previously made a videotape advertising the mummy for sale for 600 million rupee, $11 million. A press conference was held 1 week later, during which it was declared that the mummy was a Persian princess from around 600 BC. However, suspicions were aroused when American archaeologist Oscar White Muscarella reported having received photographs of the mummy from a Pakistani dealer attempting to sell it. A piece of the mummy's coffin sent for carbon dating was revealed to only be 250 years old. After further investigation, it was eventually discovered that the mummy was not a princess, but a female who had died in 1996, likely due to a blow to the neck with a blunt instrument. Her organs had been removed, and her body filled with powder. The incident was exposed as a hoax and the woman was given a proper burial in 2008. Her true identity, however, remains unknown. Number 4. The Batman Rapist. Under the code name Operation Eagle, British law enforcement have been in pursuit of a sexual predator for 22 years. This individual is believed to be responsible for 17 attacks, all of them happening in Bath, apart from one. Since May 21, 1991, when the first attack occurred on a 36-year-old woman, the modus operandi of the assailant has been to approach victims with a knife in their vehicle and drive them to an isolated area to rape them. He has been nicknamed the Batman Rapist due to the logoed hat he left behind at an unsuccessful attack in 1999. Additionally, this criminal has a strange tights obsession, often forcing his victims to put them back on so he can rip through them to rape her. On one occasion, he even brought his own pair of tights to the scene. In 2000, he attempted to abduct a woman with her 7-year-old daughter in the car, but she managed to escape. During the mid-90s, there were long periods of inactivity from the rapist, leading authorities to suspect that he has attacked other victims who never came forward. Currently, there is a considerable reward for the capture of the Batman Rapist. However, his identity still remains unknown. Number 3. Joseph Newton Chandler III. On July 30, 2002, Joseph Newton Chandler III, an elderly hermit from Eastlake, Ohio, ended his life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. An autopsy revealed he had colon cancer, which seemed to have been the reason he took his own life. When probate courts tried to process his estate, they identified his surviving relatives. A surprise to all as it was discovered that the 9-year-old Joseph Newton Chandler III had in fact perished in a car crash in Texas in 1945. The man who had been using Chandler's identity for many years had applied for a copy of Chandler's birth certificate in 1978, then used it to obtain a Social Security card. There were multiple hypotheses as to the true identity of this man. Some crime enthusiasts assumed he might be the Zodiac Killer since he was similar to the suspect's composite portrait. Others pointed out that Joseph Chandler was the name of an investigator who had found one of Jack the Ripper's victims. The man also had a striking resemblance to Stephen Craig Campbell, wanted for attempted murder since 1982 and not apprehended. However, there is no concrete evidence to back up any of these theories, leaving the true story of the man who assumed the identity of Joseph Newton Chandler III a mystery. Number 2. Rolando, Robbie Manheim. In 1973, William Peter Blatty's novel The Exorcist was adapted into a huge success on the big screen. Its story of a young girl being taken over by a demon was based on a true story that happened in 1949, when a 13-year-old boy from Cottage City, Maryland was said to be possessed by evil spirits. In order to protect his name, he is known as either Rolando or Robbie Manheim. After his aunt, a spiritualist, passed away, Roland became obsessed with using a Ouija board to contact her, and his family's home was then filled with strange noises and supernatural occurrences. Because of this, a Lutheran minister sought the help of 2 Catholic priests, Fathers Raymond J. Bishop and William J. Bowdern, to perform an exorcism on Roland at Georgetown University Hospital. After 30 exorcisms, Roland's violent behavior, speaking in Latin and words such as evil and hell, appearing on his body supposedly ceased. Roland went on to have a normal life, yet there has been much controversy as to whether he was truly possessed or if these stories have been exaggerated and he was simply struggling with mental health issues. His identity is still a secret, so the truth may never be revealed. Number 1. Suzanne Davis, Sharon Marshall, Tanya Dawn Tadlick. In April 1990, a tragic hit-and-run accident in Oklahoma took the life of a young woman, Tanya Dawn Tadlick. Her much older husband, Clarence Hughes, was the prime suspect, but it was discovered he had been living under an alias, Franklin Delano Floyd, and that he had a past as a convicted felon. Although authorities suspected that she had been abducted, Floyd claimed to have taken her in as a child in the early 1970s after she had been abandoned by her real family. He raised her as his daughter and abused her, moving around different states with her and using various names, such as Suzanne Davis and Sharon Marshall. In March 1988, she gave birth to a son, Michael, but shortly after his mother's death, Floyd was arrested and Michael was taken into foster care. DNA testing revealed that Floyd was not the father. Subsequently, in 1994, Floyd abducted Michael from his school in Oklahoma, and although he was apprehended, Michael was never found. Floyd was convicted of Michael's kidnapping and another unrelated murder and is currently on death row in Florida. He has never revealed any information about Michael's whereabouts, his real father, or the true identity of the young woman he raised as his own daughter.